3 months after the Council's decision, Captain Lauren Hayes found herself in a very different situation than she had expected. The horizon's edge hung in orbit above a small mining colony on the edge of the outer rim, and below, on the rocky surface of a barely livable moon, a crisis was unfolding and a seismic event had trapped 43 miners deep underground, and local rescue equipment was not enough, and help from the nearest council station would take 6 days to arrive. The miners had 3 days of oxygen left. Hayes stood on the bridge studying the readouts, and her crew had grown significantly since first contact, and the horizon's edge now commanded a small fleet of rapid response vessels, crewed by humans eager to explore stars and help where they could. But today it was just her original 15, the ones who started this journey. "Captain, we've got the geological scans and Dr. Palmer reported. The collapse is severe and standard rescue protocols say it's too dangerous to attempt extraction, and the recommendation is to wait for specialized equipment, which arrives in 6 days, and Hayes said quietly, and the miners die in 3. She looked at her crew and they knew what she was thinking, and they always did after 3 months of working together in crisis. After crisis, Lieutenant Danny Foster spoke up. "The rock is unstable, and if we try to dig them out, we could cause another collapse, and it's a huge risk, but it's possible," and Hayes asked. "Technically, yes. And if we use mining lasers to carefully vaporize debris and shore up weak points with emergency supports as we go, and it would take perfect coordination and about 40 hours of non-stop work, and one mistake could kill everyone down there, including the rescue team." Hayes thought about the Council's recommendation to wait for proper equipment, and she thought about the safe, reasonable, by-the-book approach that would result in 43 deaths. Then she thought about what humans did when people they cared about were in danger. "We're going in." And she decided, "Foster, Carter, Morris, suit up, and Palmer. I need you coordinating from up here, monitoring the geological stresses in real time, and everyone else prep the equipment. And we've got 40 hours to save 43 lives," Captain and Palmer said quietly. "If this goes wrong, the Council could revoke humanity's rapid response status, and they'll say, 'We were reckless that we ignored safety protocols.'" Hayes smiled grimly. "Better to be reckless and save lives than cautious and watch people die. And that's the human way. Palmer and the Council is just going to have to get used to it." 12 hours into the rescue operation, Hayes stood in a tunnel she had personally cut through 3 meters of collapsed rock, and sweat poured down her face despite the suit's climate control, and the work was exhausting and dangerous and tedious, and every meter had to be carefully vaporized, then immediately reinforced, then checked and rechecked before moving forward. Above them, tons of unstable rock waited to fall. "Captain, we've got movement in Section 4, and Morris reported over communication. The supports are holding but barely, and we need to slow down." "We can't slow down," and Hayes replied. "We're already behind schedule, and reinforce Section 4 with extra supports and keep moving." "Hayes, this is Palmer, and geological stress is increasing, and if you push any harder, you could trigger a cascading collapse." Hayes looked at the rock face in front of her, then at the timer on her suit display. And 28 hours down, 12 hours left, and they were close, so close, and she could almost hear the trapped miners on the other side. "Then we'll be careful," and she said, "But we're not stopping hour 36, and Hayes's hands shook with exhaustion, and her team had been working almost non-stop, trading off only for brief rest periods, and the tunnel stretched behind them like a scar through the rock, held together by human determination and emergency supports. "Captain, I've got something," and Foster called out. "I think I hear them," and tapping on the rock, Hayes held up a hand for silence, and through her helmet she could hear it, and a rhythmic tapping and Morse code she realized, and the universal signal for help. "We're coming," and Hayes shouted, knowing they probably couldn't hear, but unable to stop herself. "Hold on, we're coming." Hour 38, and they broke through. On the other side of the collapsed tunnel, in a pocket of air that was running dangerously low on oxygen, 43 alien miners stared at the humans in disbelief, and they were a mix of species Hayes saw, and Zelthians, and Terracon, and a few Corthan, and even a couple Lumasi, and all of them exhausted and scared and now shocked humans, and one of them whispered, "The legends were true, and they came for us." Hayes pulled off her helmet, breathing the stale air of the trapped chamber, Yeah, well, humans are stubborn like that. And we don't leave people behind and everyone able to walk, and we need to move quickly, and this whole area is unstable. The evacuation took another 4 hours, and every miner had to be carefully guided through the tunnel, moving slowly to avoid triggering collapse, and Hayes went last, watching the supports groan under stress. Just as the final miner cleared the danger zone section, 4 gave way, Hayes ran, and the tunnel collapsing behind her, and supports failing one after another in a domino effect, and she could feel rock falling and could hear the roar of collapse chasing her through darkness. She cleared the threshold with seconds to spare, and hands grabbed her, pulling her to safety. As the tunnel behind her filled with falling rock, Hayes lay on the ground, breathing hard, staring up at the rocky ceiling of the chamber they had been using as staging area, and around her 43 grateful miners and her exhausted crew. Everyone made it, and she gasped. Everyone in Foster confirmed, all 43 miners, all 15 crew, and 0 casualties. Hayes started to laugh, and exhaustion and relief mixing into something almost crazy. We actually did it, and we saved them all, later aboard. The horizon's edge, Hayes stood in the observation bubble and watched rescue ships arrive from the Council, and 6 days of travel for equipment that was no longer needed. And she wondered what they would say about humans who ignored protocols and risked everything to save strangers. High Counselor Ven's face appeared on the communication screen, and her expression was unreadable. Captain Hayes, I have read the reports of your rescue operation, and the Council Safety Commission is not pleased, and you violated 3 major safety protocols and risked your entire crew. Hayes straightened. Yes, Counselor, I did, and because those protocols would have resulted in 43 deaths, and I chose to save lives instead of following rules. Ven was quiet for a long moment, and then incredibly she smiled. Captain Hayes, the Safety Commission is not pleased, but the rest of the Council is celebrating, and you saved 43 lives that we had written off as lost, and you did the impossible because you refused to accept that it was impossible, and that is exactly why we wanted humans as our rapid response force. She leaned forward. The Commission will send you a strongly worded memo about safety protocols and file it appropriately, and then continue doing exactly what you're doing, and the galaxy needs more beings who will break rules to save lives. Over the following months, the pattern repeated, and crises that seemed impossible, and situations where the book said to wait or retreat, and humans who looked at the book and said, but what if we tried anyway? A plague ship that Council quarantine protocol said should be destroyed before disease could spread, and Hayes and her crew boarded it in full biohazard gear and saved 80% of infected through improvised treatment while simultaneously preventing disease from escaping. A hostage situation where negotiations failed, and Council military forces were preparing for full assault that would result in massive casualties, and Hayes walked in alone and unarmed, and talked for 6 hours straight, and walked out with all hostages safe and hostage takers surrendering peacefully. A collapsing space station where evacuation was deemed too dangerous, and Hayes's fleet formed, a human chain of ships physically bracing the station structure, while simultaneously evacuating 3,000 people through unsafe corridors that regulations said were impassable. Each time the Council sent strongly worded memos about protocol violations. Each time the Council also celebrated as humans did the impossible. 6 months after first contact, Ambassador Krell invited Hayes to his quarters for what he called a conversation about the future. Hayes found him standing by a large window, looking out at the vast Vaxian homeworld below, and his colors were thoughtful amber mixed with troubled violet. Captain Hayes, thank you for coming, and I wanted to discuss something that has been troubling the Council, or rather troubling me, and I suspect others feel similarly. What's wrong? Ambassador Krell gestured to chairs, and they sat. You have been with us for 6 months, and in that time, humanity has completed 17 impossible rescue operations and prevented 4 wars and stopped 2 genocides and saved approximately 47,000 lives, and the mathematics are clear, and the galaxy is a better place with humans in it. That sounds like a good thing. And Hayes said cautiously, it is, but here is the problem. And you are making us look bad, and Krell's colors shifted to embarrassed green. For 10,000 years, the Council has maintained order through diplomacy and careful application of military force, and we have rules and protocols and procedures, and we are measured and careful and slow to act, and this has kept the peace. but it has also meant that we often arrive too late to help those who need us most. He looked directly at Hayes. Then humans arrive and immediately start breaking every rule we have. The council chamber had been changed for what High Counselor Ven called the trial of truth, though she was careful to say humanity was not on trial but rather the galaxy itself was being forced to face its legends and beliefs about these strange beings from the quarantine world. 5 days had passed since the hostage crisis, and 5 days where Captain Hayes and her crew stayed on the station, meeting with delegates and sharing meals and telling stories and slowly, carefully tearing down 10,000 years of fear with simple human interaction. Now the full council gathered not just representatives but elders of each species, and the chamber was filled to capacity with observers from 100 worlds watching through quantum links. Hayes sat in a chair sized for her at the chamber's center, feeling like a bug under glass, and her crew sat behind her in support. And across the vast space on elevated platforms, the council members watched with expressions from curiosity to barely hidden. Worryven stood at her podium, and her voice carried through the chamber with quiet power. We are here today to make a big decision, and humanity has reached the stars, and the question is simple: and do we welcome them into the galactic community, or maintain quarantine for everyone's safety? She gestured toward Hayes. Captain Hayes has shown both capacity for violence and capacity for peace that legends speak of, and the council has reviewed historical records that historian Thessa gathered. And now we must hear testimony from those who encountered humanity across ages and judge for ourselves what these beings truly are. The first to speak was a Zelthian elder, and his crystal form pulsed with memory light, and his name was Crystallis. And according to introduction, he was nearly 600 years old. I will speak of the rescue, and Crystallis began with voice like wind chimes. 4 centuries ago, when I was young, our colony ship was attacked by pirates in the Outer Rim, and we sent distress call knowing we would die before help came. But someone answered, and humans in a ship so old and damaged it should not fly. His light pulsed with remembered feeling. 3 humans against 20 pirates, and the odds were crazy. But those humans flew like dancing with death, and they rammed their ship into pirate generators and turned mining charges into weapons and fought with desperation that made no sense. And when it was over, when pirates fled, our captain offered them salvage and repairs and wealth, and the human captain, a woman with scars and fire in her eyes, refused everything, and she only asked, did everyone survive? Crystallis turned his gaze to Hayes. When we said yes, she smiled and then took her damaged ship back into dark too, proud to accept payment for doing what she believed was right. And we have told this story for 400 years. And to my people, humans are not monsters but heroes. A sound ran through the chamber, and Ven nodded and gestured to next speaker, Commander. Thox of the Korthan rose, and his scarred armor caught the light, and he was huge and marked from 100 battles. I will speak of shame, and he rumbled. 600 years ago, my ancestors raided what they thought was defenseless mining colony, and 20 armored Korthan warriors against 37 miners, and it should have been simple. His voice dropped. 18 Korthan died, and the miners turned their facility into a death trap and fought with tools and rocks and bare hands, and 1 human, shot through the chest, kept fighting 4 minutes, and another on fire. Still charged our lines, and when it was over, when only 2 Korthan survived, the human leader let them go. And she pointed to stars and said in language we didn't speak but understood, and tell others never come back. Thox looked directly at Hayes. For 6 centuries this has been our greatest shame, and 20 warriors defeated by human miners. But I have met you now, Captain Hayes, and seen you fight not to kill but to save. And I wonder if our shame was not in being defeated but in attacking first. A bowed deep, which was profound respect among his people. The Korthan vote to welcome humanity, and perhaps we can learn from beings who are better warriors than us, yet choose peace first. The testimonies went on for hours, and a Terracon trader spoke of humans who paid debts even when easy to disappear into space, and a Meridian scientist told of humans who shared research freely, asking nothing except chance to learn in return. But not all testimonies were positive. A Vaxian military commander stood, and his scales were dark with troubled colors. I speak against humanity's admission, and he said bluntly, 30 years ago, one of our patrol ships met a human vessel in disputed space, and a misunderstanding led to weapons fire, and the human ship was destroyed, and we thought that was the end. His colors shifted to sick green. 3 months later, a human fleet appeared at border, and not military vessels, but civilian ships changed For war and miners and traders and colony ships all armed and organized, and they demanded we turn over the patrol captain for trial, and when we refused, they attacked the border station. He paused. They fought for 6 hours in civilians against military, and they should have been killed, but they kept coming wave after wave, accepting losses that would break any other species, and they destroyed 4 defense platforms before we agreed to talk. The commander looked at Hayes. The captain was tried and punished for his mistake, and humans accepted this and left. But that is the danger, you see. And they do not just seek revenge. They organize it, and they turn their entire civilization into a weapon when one of their own is wronged. And that capacity for organized violence is terrifying. Hayes felt compelled to respond, and she stood with permission to speak. Commander, you're not wrong, and she said quietly, humans do organize and we remember wrongs, but you're missing the other side of that story. And those weren't military ships that came for your captain, but civilians who gave up safety and comfort and lives to seek justice for someone they probably never met. And that's not just capacity for violence, but capacity for sacrifice. She looked around the chamber. Yes, humans can be dangerous, and we won't pretend otherwise, but we're dangerous because we care about each other with intensity that maybe seems crazy to other species, and we don't abandon our own, and we don't forget those who help or harm us, and we don't accept injustice when we can do something even if that something is risky or costly. Hayes took a breath. Judge us for that if you must, but know this trait, this stubborn loyalty works both ways, and if you accept us into council, we will defend every member species as fiercely as we defend our own, and that's not a threat but a promise. The chamber was silent. Then a new voice spoke, and it came from a small, fragile-looking being Hayes had not seen before, and the creature looked like an earth butterfly with delicate wings and a body that seemed breakable. I am speaker. Whisper of the Lumacy, and the being said in voice like rustling, Silk, my people are pacifists, and we have no weapons, no warriors, no capacity for violence, and we survive through talk and by hiding when we must. And for 2,000 years we have been hunted by stronger species, and we pay tribute to avoid extinction. The Lumacy fluttered closer to Hayes. When we heard humans were coming, we were terrified, and all legends spoke of violence. But then we read historian Thessa's report, and do you know what we found? And in every encounter where humans were not threatened or provoked, they were kind, and they helped those weaker and showed mercy to defeated enemies and sacrifice for strangers. Whisper's wings trembled. The Lumacy have a saying, and the measure of a species is not what they do to equals, but what they do to those weaker. And by this measure, humans are not monsters but protectors. The small, being looked up at Hayes with compound eyes that somehow showed enormous emotion. Captain Hayes, if the Council accepts humanity, would your species extend protection to those of us who cannot protect ourselves? Hayes felt the weight of the question, and she thought about Earth's history, and about times humans failed to protect the vulnerable, and about colonialism and slavery and genocide, and all the ways her species had been monsters to each other. But she also thought about times humans stood up for defenseless, and about those who fought injustice even when it cost everything, and about capacity for compassion that existed alongside capacity for cruelty. Yes, and Hayes said simply, not because we're perfect, not because we always get it right, but because we believe the strong should protect the weak, and it's one of our oldest values even if we don't always live up to it. But we try, and we always try. Whisper's wings spread wide in what might be their version of smile. Then the Lumacy vote to welcome humanity, and we need heroes more than we fear monsters. The debate went deep into station's night cycle, and arguments for and against and hopes and fears all laid bare. Finally, Ambassador Krell of the Vaxian Empire rose to speak, and his colors were thoughtful. Amber, I have listened to all testimonies, and he said, I have reviewed evidence, and I have read legends of my people and compared them to reality of humans walking among us. And I have come to a conclusion. He looked at Hayes. The humans are exactly what legends said they would be, and warriors without equal, and beings of unstoppable determination, and creatures who refuse to surrender or abandon their own, and all of this is true. His colors shifted to brilliant gold. But the legends were incomplete, and they spoke only of danger, never of kindness, and only of violence, never of compassion, and only of what humans might do to us. never of what they might do for us, and the legends told us to fear these beings. But perhaps we should have been hoping for them instead. Krell spread his arms wide. The galaxy is not safe, and there are pirates and slavers and tyrants, and Captain Lauren Hayes floated in the observation bubble of the horizon's edge, watching the council station grow from a tiny spark to a magnificent structure. And it looked like something from a dream, with flowing curves and crystal surfaces that defied every human idea about how to build things in space. Behind her, the rest of her crew worked at their stations with smooth efficiency, and 15 humans, the best Earth could offer, chosen for diplomatic skills as much as technical knowledge, and linguists and scientists and engineers and doctors, and Hayes herself was a veteran of the Mars colony wars, chosen because someone in command thought humanity's first ambassadors should include someone who knew how to handle trouble. Looking at that peaceful, beautiful station, Hayes thought that decision might have been too cautious. Captain, we're getting docking instructions, and Lieutenant Danny Foster called from communications. They're giving us Bay 47, and it looks like a standard diplomatic berth. Acknowledge and comply, and Hayes ordered, pushing off the wall and floating back to her command chair. Nice and easy, people, and we're making history today, so let's try not to crash into it. Nervous laughter spread through the bridge, and they all felt it, the weight of the moment and first contact and humanity's introduction to a galactic community that had been watching them for thousands of years without saying hello. Hayes had read all the briefings and all the theories about why Earth had been left alone for so long, and some said the Council was afraid of humanity, and others believed they were simply waiting for humans to grow up. Either way, the waiting was over. Approaching docking clamps, and Lieutenant Amy Carter announced, "From helm contact in 30 seconds." Hayes felt the gentle bump as the horizon's edge settled into its berth, and through the windows she could see aliens moving about the station, and actual aliens, and a figure made of crystal plates and something with too many legs and a massive armored being that made her think of ancient warriors. Atmospheric sensors show the station has oxygen and nitrogen. We can breathe. And Dr. Greg Palmer reported from Science's temperature is 19 degrees and gravity is 0.9 standard, and we can walk around out there without suits. How nice of them, and Hayes said quietly, and she stood smoothing her uniform, which was navy blue, with Earth symbol on the shoulder, simple and professional. Foster, notify the station we're ready. And Carter, you have the ship, and Palmer, you're with me, and we're going to meet our new neighbors. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Hayes stepped through with Palmer at her side, and they found themselves in a corridor that looked like it belonged in an art museum, with flowing lines and walls that glowed from within. And standing at the corridor's end were 3 figures. The center figure was elegant and tall, sort of humanoid, but with skin that shimmered like pearl, and she wore robes made of what looked like liquid light, and this Hayes knew from briefings was High Counselor Ven, leader of the Galactic Council. To Ven's right stood a being covered in blue scales with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond on its face, and Ambassador Krell of the Vaxian Empire, according to files. To her left was something that made Hayes's combat training activate automatically and massive easily. 3 meters tall, covered in scarred armor that looked battle-worn, and a Korthan warrior. Hayes walked forward with steady confidence, and Palmer kept pace. And when they were 3 meters away, Hayes stopped and bowed with hand over heart in traditional Earth respect. High Counselor Ven, on behalf of humanity and Earth, I thank you for this chance, and I am Captain Lauren Hayes of the Horizon's Edge, and we come in peace. And friendship. Ven's face was hard to read, but she returned the gesture with a graceful head bow. Captain Hayes, welcome to Council Station, and I'm honored to meet you. And these are Ambassador Krell and Commander Thox, and they will guide you during your stay. There was something in Ven's tone, a carefully hidden tension, and Hayes had heard that tone before in negotiators trying to hide nervousness. They're afraid of us, she realized, and actually afraid. The thought seemed crazy, and these beings had technology centuries ahead of Earth, and they commanded hundreds of worlds, and they were nervous about 15 humans in one ship. I look forward to learning about your society. And Hayes said carefully, Earth has been alone for a long time, and we're eager to find our place among the stars. Indeed. And Krell said with a surprisingly musical voice, despite alien features, we have much to discuss. Captain, and your species has many unique qualities. The way he said unique made it sound like a polite word for terrifying. Before Hayes could respond, Alarms began screaming throughout the station. Ven's expression changed to shock. What is happening? A voice crackled over the station speakers, harsh and full of static. People of the council. Your corruption ends today, and the Union of Free Colonies rejects your tyranny in this station, and everyone on it are hostages and meet our demands or face consequences. Hayes's combat training kicked in immediately, and she looked at the corridor and 3 exits. No cover, no weapons, and Palmer had gone pale beside her. Terrorists, and Thox growled, reaching for a weapon at his belt. The Free Colonies movement and extremists who think the council oppresses outer settlements, and they have never been. This bold explosions echoed through the station and lights flickered, the docking bays, and Ven said with controlled panic in her voice, they are sealing all ships and no one can leave, and security needs at least an hour to respond without risking hostages. Hayes made a fast decision. Counselor, I request permission to return to my ship, and we can help. Your ship is for science, and Krell objected. These are trained fighters with military weapons. We're not helpless, and Hayes said flat. And then more gently, please and let us help. Ven studied Hayes for a long moment, and something passed behind her eyes. Permission granted. But Captain, I must warn you. No need, and Hayes interrupted, already moving with Palmer following. We know what we're doing. They ran back to the horizon's edge, and Hayes hit the communication panel the moment the airlock sealed. All hands combat stations, and Carter get me tactical feed of the station, and Foster access their security network, and Palmer breakout equipment from cargo hold. 3 Captain, and Carter's voice was confused. We're a science vessel and we don't have combat equipment. Yes, we do, and Hayes said grimly. We just told everyone we didn't because sometimes it's useful when people underestimate you, and now move. 10 minutes later, Hayes stood in the cargo hold looking at equipment hidden beneath scientific instruments and body armor modified for zero gravity, and weapons officially classified as mining tools. But anyone with military experience would know what they really were. Earth's government sent diplomats on a peace mission, but they also sent them ready for war just in case. Captain, I've got the station layout, and Carter called over communication. The terrorists seized main control and holding about 200 hostages, and they're behind blast doors, and station security is negotiating, but not succeeding. Hayes pulled on armor, moving with practiced ease of someone who had done this many times. How many terrorists? Best count is 15, maybe 20, and they have plasma weapons and explosives rigged in the control center. 15 to 20 armed fighters versus 15 scientists and mining equipment, and on paper it should be suicide. But Hayes had been a Marine before captain, and every crew member was chosen not just for diplomatic skills, but for ability to handle crisis. All right, people, and she said into ship-wide channel, I know we came to make friends, but right now innocent people need help, and station security can't reach them fast enough. So we're going to introduce ourselves the other way, and the way humans do when people they care about are in danger. She checked her weapon, which was officially a mining laser, but actually very effective if you knew how to use it. Let's go save some lives. 20 minutes later, Hayes led her team through maintenance corridors, and they moved in tactical formation, covering each other, communicating with hand signals and to any observer. They looked like professional military, not scientists, because that's what they had been before becoming diplomats. Contact ahead, and Lieutenant Jake Morris whispered. 2 guards at the access route to control center. Hayes checked the situation through her helmet display, and the guards were heavily armed, alert, professional, and taking them down quietly would be hard. Morris Chen flank left, and Carter Wilson flank right, and I'll go straight and on my mark. She counted down from 3 with her fingers, and on 0. She stepped into the corridor. The guards saw her immediately with weapons coming up, and Hayes raised her hands with weapon holstered, smiling peacefully. Hi there, and she said in accented Galactic common, I'm lost, and can you help me find? The guards never saw her team from the sides, and they were unconscious before raising alarm. Tie them up and hide them, and Hayes ordered. We need 10 more minutes before they know we're here. They moved deeper, taking out guards with quiet efficiency, and Hayes felt old familiar calm settle over her. The combat state where everything became clear and objective, save hostages and obstacle terrorists, and solution remove terrorists. But approaching control center, Hayes saw something through a window, and 3 aliens who were civilians, huddled together, guarded by 1 terrorist. The terrorist was young, Hayes realized, and barely more than a kid, and his weapon shook slightly. Hayes made another decision, and she handed her weapon to Carter and walked straight through the door with hands visible and empty. The young terrorist spun toward her with weapon raised. Stop and do not move or I fire. Thessa moved through the archive of echoes like a ghost through old memories, and the Lumasi historian had spent 300 years organizing all the knowledge that 12 civilizations had collected, and she thought she knew every secret these halls contained, but the emergency council meeting proved her wrong. Now armed with new search words and desperate curiosity, she went into the archive's deepest chambers where data went to be forgotten, and files marked as legend or myth or error, and the digital leftovers of 10,000 years sat waiting. Her glowing form flickered between data points as her consciousness split to search multiple databases at once, and she typed in human, and soul, and Forbidden Zone Delta 7, and pale demons, and endless fighters, and she cast her net wide, pulling up fragments that had been dismissed or misfiled for thousands of years. What she found made her ancient soul tremble with fear and wonder. The first real record came from the Terracon hive, dated over 7,000 years in the past, and it was a simple survey report marked as corrupted data and never properly translated. But Thessa's modern computers made quick work of the ancient code survey log from Terracon scout ship Harmony of Purpose. And Sector Captain Zixthik reporting, "We have found a remarkable world in Sector 447G, and the third planet circles a yellow star at the perfect distance for life. And early scans show a species at early industrial development, and the beings are two-legged and mammal-like and show remarkable ability with tools, important observation, and the species appears to destroy itself, and they fight organized wars on a massive scale, and 2 separate wars observed in the short time we studied them. And despite having weapons that could kill everyone, they persist, and recommendation is quarantine until species grows up or goes extinct, and likelihood of extinction is 87% within next 1,000 years." Thessa checked the coordinates, and it was the Sol system and humanity at its early industrial age already fighting wars with itself. She pulled the next important file from the Meridian expansion era, from over 5,000 years ago. Cultural research note from Meridian anthropologist. Zealous and unauthorized contact report. "I know this message will get me in trouble, but some discoveries are too important for rules. And while surveying restricted zone 447G against quarantine orders, I watched the protected species launching primitive spacecraft, and their technology is crude, but their determination is extraordinary. I saw a chemical rocket failure that killed 3 of them, and the emotional response from the planet was so strong, I could detect it from orbit, and they mourned deeply. And then within 40 of their days, they launched another rocket and another and another, and each time learning from failure, and each time refusing to accept defeat. I have studied 47 developing civilizations, and none have shown this mix of fragility and stubborn will in these beings should not survive their own violent nature. Yet they push forward anyway, and I recommend immediate contact, and a species this determined could help the Council greatly, or destroy us if left alone. Recommendation rejected by Council, and anthropologist Celis punished for breaking protocol." Thessa felt a chill run through her energy form, and the Council had known about humans for thousands of years and had watched them and deliberately left them alone. But why? She dove deeper, pulling files from Corthan military records and Vaxian historical databases, and even sealed Council files, and a picture began forming that was broken and disturbing. Humans had reached space before, and not once but multiple times across their history, and each time they rose and spread to neighboring worlds and built colonies on Mars and Jupiter's moons, and each time something destroyed them through war or plague or resource collapse or their own nature, but they never went extinct completely, and they fell back to their homeworld and rebuilt from ashes and reached for the stars again and over across 10,000 years of observation. Humanity rose and fell and rose again, like a Phoenix 1 file was particularly frightening. And it was a Vaxian psychology report from the second contact incident that Krell mentioned behavioral analysis of captured subject at Vaxian Medical Research Station. Theta 9 subject is a human male, about 30 local years old, and captured during raid on primitive settlement and transported to station for study, and subject is remarkably adaptable, and within 4 days, subject learned door controls by watching, and within 9 days subject escaped primary containment by making a cutting tool from meal tray pieces. Security caught subject after brief chase, and subject showed no fear, only cold calculation, and when placed in better containment, subject immediately began testing for weaknesses. And guard reports say subject sleeps in strange intervals and appears to be learning our language from overheard conversations and watches. Everything with disturbing focus. Day 17 and subject escaped secondary containment and made electromagnetic. Pulse device from medical scanner parts and disabled 3 guard drones and reached shuttle bay before being caught again. Day 23 and subject escaped during facility drill and used the confusion to get access codes and stole guard uniform, and walked right through checkpoint while speaking broken Vaxian, and reached shuttle and launched before we could stop him. And subject had never seen ship controls, but achieved stable orbit within minutes of trying recommendation and immediate end to experiment, and this species is far too dangerous for study, and they do not just adapt. They learn from captors and turn our systems against us, and subject has no special powers, only relentless focus and absolute refusal to accept being. Caged request denied and experiment continues day 31, and subject escaped and took 3 guards hostage and stole research vessel and destroyed 2 pursuit ships using weapons he should not know how to operate, and subject sent message before, jumping to light speed saying coming for the others and run. The report ended there, but Thessa found the aftermath scattered through Vaxian military logs, and the escaped human did return, and with a stolen ship and improvised weapons, he attacked 3 Vaxian research stations across 2 months, and he freed every human captive plus specimens from a dozen other species, and then he vanished heading toward the galactic rim. The Vaxian Empire declared the whole thing classified and ordered all records sealed and turned the Sol system into a permanent forbidden zone. Thessa pulled more files building a timeline, and humans encountered across thousands of years always the same pattern and capture them. They escape and attack them. They fight back beyond logic and help them. They become fiercely loyal and ignore them. They persist anyway. One account from a Zelthian merchant stood out clearly. Personal log from Trader Vess, during cycle 4782I, have made a terrible mistake, and while trading in the outer territories, I bought what I was told were simple workers from a pirate and 10 beings in sleep pods, and the seller said they were modified workers, legal to trade. They were not, and they were humans, kidnapped from their colony. And when I discovered the truth, I immediately woke them and explained the error, and I expected anger and violence. But instead their leader, a woman named Claire, simply asked where their colony was. I gave them a shuttle, and supplies, and coordinates. And Claire thanked me, and she said, "Humans remember kindness as much as cruelty." And then she asked one more question, and are there others? And other humans taken by slavers? I should have lied, but her eyes held such strength, and I told the truth. And yes, there were rumors of human slaves in the Korthax sector, and perhaps 30 or 40 scattered across different markets. Claire smiled, and it was not a comforting look. And she said, "Thank you. And you've been kind. And I'll make sure others know," and then they left. That was 60 days ago. And this morning I got a message from a Korthan trading station in Korthax sector, and the entire slaver network has been destroyed, and 43 slave markets raided, and over 2,000 slaves freed, including every captured human, and the raiders were a group of 10 humans in a single shuttle, fighting an entire sector of criminals. The message included a note for me from Claire, saying we keep our promises, and if you're ever in trouble, send word to Sol System, and humans remember. I am writing this because I need to understand what I saw. And 10 beings freed from captivity with no duty to anyone chose to wage war against an entire criminal sector to save strangers, and not for profit and not for revenge, but simply because it was right. What kind of species does this? Thessa absorbed thousands of such accounts, and humans fighting impossible battles, and humans refusing to leave wounded behind, and humans making last stands that lasted days, and humans sacrificing themselves for strangers, and humans showing mercy to defeated enemies, and humans being cruel to those who threatened their own. The pattern was clear and terrifying, and humans were whatever they needed to be in any moment, and warriors or healers and destroyers or builders and monsters or heroes. And they contained everything, and could shift between extremes without warning. One final file caught her attention, and it was a sealed council document from 2,000 years ago, only accessible to high counselors, and Thessa broke protocol and opened it. Council Directive 447 Final, regarding human quarantine. After long debate, the Council has reached a conclusion about the species called humans, from Sol system, and they represent either the greatest opportunity or greatest threat our civilization has ever encountered. Recommendation: and maintain quarantine until humanity achieves. The Council chamber floated in space like a giant glass flower, and its walls showed 1,000,000 stars beyond, and 12 different alien races had built this place together as a symbol of peace and cooperation. But today that peace was shaking and trembling like a leaf in a storm. Ambassador Krell stood at his speaking platform, and his blue scales had turned purple with worry, and his 4 eyes blinked one after another as he looked around at all the other aliens in the room, and finally he spoke in a voice that everyone could hear. "They are here and the humans have come." A wave of nervous energy passed through the chamber like ripples on water, and the Zelthian representative, who was made of pure light inside a crystal shell, began to glow with anxious colors, and the Korthan warriors, who were massive and covered in armor, shifted uncomfortably in their seats because even these battle-hardened fighters seemed uneasy. High Counselor Ven raised one elegant hand to get everyone's attention, and she was a Meridian whose species had led the Council for 200 years, and her voice was calm but curious when she spoke. "Ambassador Krell, we know that a ship from the Sol system has entered our space, but why does this need an emergency meeting, and we have protocols for first contact that work?" Well, Krell's throat pouch inflated, which showed he was very distressed, and this was unusual for someone so experienced and diplomatic. "Because, High Counselor, every elder among my people knows the stories, and every child hears the warnings before they sleep. And we thought they were just myths and tales to teach children wisdom. But the star charts match perfectly, and the system they call Sol, we know by another name." He paused, to let his words sink into everyone's minds. "The forbidden world and the cradle of storms, and the place where the pale demons sleep." A Terracon counselor who looked like a giant insect clicked its jaws in doubt. "You speak of legends, Ambassador Krell, but we deal in facts and science." "Then let me give you facts," and Krell's voice was steady, even though his color showed fear. 3,000 years ago, the Vaxian Empire controlled 40 star systems, and we were explorers, and young and eager as a civilization, and our ships went far into unknown space mapping new regions, and one expedition found a world that was blue and green and rich with life, and primitive beings walked on its surface, barely out of their stone age. He touched a control, and a hologram appeared showing an ancient version of Earth with continents in slightly different positions due to time. The expedition made a terrible mistake, and they took specimens for study and for science, and Krell's colors turned to a shamed gray. Those beings hunted the expedition across 3 star systems, and with stolen shuttles and captured weapons they pursued our ships, and they could not match our technology, but they never stopped coming. And when our ships jumped to light speed, they followed, and when our warriors fought them, they kept attacking even with wounds that should have killed them. And the expedition leader sent one final message before his ship went silent, and the message said, "They do not know how to surrender, and they do not understand defeat and run." The chamber became completely silent. Only one ship returned, and Krell continued. "The captain was insane from what he had seen, and he died screaming that the demons would follow, and that they would never forget, and that they would come for revenge, and the council of that time made the system a forbidden zone, and no ship was allowed to approach the 3rd planet ever again." High Counselor Ven leaned forward with concern. "And you believe these humans are the same species as those primitive beings?" "I know they are," and Krell said firmly. "Because 2 days ago, when their vessel entered our space, it sent a greeting in 40 different languages, and one of them was Ancient Vaxian, which is a language we have not spoken for 3,000 years. And the message was simple, and it said, 'We remember, but we come in peace.' The implications hung heavy in the air like a storm about to break. Commander Thox of the Korthan Warfleet rose from his seat, and he was huge and scarred from 100 battles and decorated for valor in 20 campaigns, and his species were the galaxy's greatest warriors, bred for combat from birth. The Korthan have legends too, and his deep voice rumbled through the chamber. We do not share them with outsiders, and we do not speak of them even among ourselves. But if the humans are here, then the truth must be told." He activated his display, and ancient battle footage appeared grainy and old. 600 years ago, a Korthan raiding party attacked what we thought was an undefended mining colony, and 20 of our warriors in full battle armor against what sensors said were 37 unarmed miners. and it should have been simple to raid for supplies, and maybe take some slaves. The footage showed Korthan warriors breaking into a facility, and then chaos erupted and figures moved impossibly fast using mining tools as weapons, and a human woman with a plasma cutter held off 3 warriors alone, and a human man who was shot 4 times, still fought with his bare hands. We lost 18 warriors, and Thok said quietly with shame in his voice. The recording shows why, and those beings fought with tools and rocks and their hands and teeth, and one of them was shot through the chest, and kept fighting for 4 more minutes before falling, and another was on fire and still charging our lines, and they turned their entire facility into a death trap with every corridor rigged to explode. He paused, and his massive form seemed smaller. The final 2 warriors survived only because the humans chose to let them go, and their leader was a human female covered in blood, and she walked up to our commander and spoke in a language we did not know, but her meaning was clear, and she pointed at the survivors and then at their ship, and then at the stars, and the message was, "Get out and tell others and never come back." The footage showed the woman small and fragile compared to the armored Korthan standing over the bodies of her fellow miners, and she was crying, but she never looked away from the surviving raiders. Our warriors returned and lied, saying the colony was defended by elite troops, maybe 100 or more, and they lied to save face. And when the truth came out, decades later, it became our greatest shame, and 20 Korthan warriors defeated by human miners, and the system was marked as hostile, and we called them the Endless Fighters, and the ones who refused to fall high. Counselor Ven looked troubled. Are there other testimonies and other races with similar stories? A dozen platforms lit up at once, and the Zelthians and the Terracon and the Meridians, and even the peaceful Lumasi had stories to tell. For 2 hours, the council listened to legend after legend, and stories of humans appearing at the edges of space across thousands of years, and always different, and always changing with their technology, rising and falling as if they built civilizations and destroyed them, over and over, but always the same. Truth remained, and they never gave up, and they never abandoned their own, and they never forgot. The Zelthian representative glowed with memory as it shared its story. My great ancestor was on a colony ship attacked by pirates, and the ship was crippled, and life support was failing, and we sent a distress call knowing we would die before help came. But someone answered, and a human ship, ancient and barely spaceworthy, came to help. Even though we were strangers, the light intensified. The pirates had modern weapons and military shields, and the human ship had mining lasers and improvised armor, and it should have been destroyed in seconds. But those humans flew like they were possessed, and they rammed their ship into the pirates' generators, and used mining charges as weapons, and their pilot steered with one hand, while shooting through a hole in the hull with the other. The hologram showed a battered cargo ship spinning through enemy fire with impossible moves. They saved us and 3 humans against 20 pirates, and when it was over and the pirates fled, the human captain refused treasure. And she only asked, "Did everyone survive?" And when we said yes, she smiled, and then her ship left back into the dark, too proud to accept even repairs as payment. Ven absorbed everything with troubled features. So we face a puzzle, and the humans are warriors beyond compare, yet they come in peace, and they are feared in 1,000 legends, yet they are also saviors. And what are we to make of this? Krell's colors shifted to thoughtful amber. I have spent 2 days researching everything about humans and their radio signals, which reached us for a century, and their culture and history and nature, and I learned something that both terrifies and amazes me. He showed more data, and human history scrolled past, showing wars and terrible things, but also art and music and beauty and acts of cruelty beside acts of incredible kindness. They are not just warriors, and Krell said softly. They are everything, and they can do terrible violence and sublime compassion, and they have killed billions of their own kind. Yet they have also died by billions to save strangers, and they are walking contradictions, and that makes them truly dangerous, because we cannot predict them. And Thox added with understanding. A warrior I understand, and a pacifist I understand, but beings who are both and who can switch in a heartbeat, and that is chaos. Ven stood with the weight of leadership in her voice. Then we must learn the truth, and we must meet these humans face to face and determine what they represent. And I authorize full first contact protocol, and their ship, the Horizon's Edge, will dock at this station, and we will meet them as equals with full honors, and we will judge them by actions, not legends. She looked around at everyone, and we will all watch very carefully.